Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The House moves forward on private school scholarships, or is it vouchers they're debating? The capital punishment debate gets another look this week, and negotiations over leasing Dorothea Dix property takes a turn. Hello, I'm Kelly McCullen. Thanks for watching Legislative Week in Review. Let's begin in the House, where the Education Committee has approved school voucher legislation. Supporters say their focus is giving low-income students a chance, but others say that chance will come at public education's expense. The House Education Committee heard its second week of public testimony on House Bill 944. This legislation would allow public school students who receive free or reduced school lunches to receive private school tuition subsidies.
Students have come to us from all situations and all walks of life, some with spiritual, emotional, academic, and or physical needs. We have witnessed within a few weeks to a few months and throughout several years witness transformation among these students.
Rodney Ellis is a public educator and president of the North Carolina Association of Educators. He says poor families in North Carolina are worried about paying their bills and putting food on the family table.
I've witnessed their struggle to fund field trips, provide school supplies, put food on the table, and keep a roof over their heads. And I assure you, for most of them, there are no additional funds available in the household to offset the cost of tuition for private schools.
An organization called the Professional Educators of North Carolina says the voucher bill would cost $100 million to implement. That's money that would leave the public schools to fund private campuses.
As taxpayers, we've already invested so much in North Carolina's constitutionally mandated public school system, and we're just getting to a point where we have some methods of accountability in place. This bill, unfortunately, moves in the opposite direction and provides few provisions for private schools' accountability to taxpayers and the students they serve.
Joe Hice says vouchers will save the state tax money.
When parents are given a choice about the education of their children do achieve better. And the current model in our state, unfortunately, discriminates against children who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder.
Voucher critics told the House Education Committee that private schools will handpick public school students who apply. They say for all the children that could be helped under this bill, many more needy students will be overlooked.
HB 944 isn't about a broken public system, and it isn't about a lack of choice.
House Bill 944 supporters offered an alternative bill this week with one change. It would require that students receiving vouchers be tested every year. Bill sponsors also say their legislation would cost only $50 million between 2013 and 2015, not the $100 million that voucher opponents offer.
In the initial year, about 2,000 students could exercise on a scholarship, and the following year about an additional, about 9,000 total.
Durham County Representative Paul Lukey fought the bill's allowance that public scholarships could fund private religious schools, a point challenged by voucher sponsors.
I do not see how, gentlemen, you can support a bill that so flagrantly gives taxpayer money to schools which state as their mission to teach one or another denomination within the Christian faith. And actually, I will say, I did see with respect to Raleigh, Representative Ross's query, there is a Muslim school that will teach from the Quran.
We're not giving money to a particular school. A parent is giving money to a particular school to send their child. It is perfectly constitutional. We already do it in pre-K and in our colleges. I assume you would not like us to stop supporting these pre-Ks or these private universities that we support through the GI Bill and others.
The House Education Committee approved House Bill 944 that sends it to the House Appropriations Committee. Questions of whether this bill could be debated as a standalone bill or rolled into the much larger House budget bill could not be answered by Education Committee leaders. Charter schools received a setback this week as a proposed loan program failed in the House Education Committee. House Bill 291 proposed offering new charter school campuses a $25,000 loan to cover startup costs. The bill would have required $1.5 million in state funding to get started, but the committee voted to kill it. The Senate Finance Committee began reviewing tax reform legislation Thursday. Two bills were reviewed. The first one sets a flat personal income tax rate that will reach 4.5% by 2016. A person's first $10,000 of income would not be taxed. Another bill would cut business tax credits, or loopholes to critics, while lowering the overall state corporate income tax rate.
It is an attempt to fix an antiquated, outdated tax code. It does not seek to increase taxes. It does not seek to decrease taxes.
If we treat everybody the same, everybody's equally handled by the Department of Revenue and the tax policy, what this does is it puts more money in people's pockets.
A bill to resume state executions appears heading for a full House floor debate. It cleared a House Judiciary Subcommittee and arrives with Republican House support and full Senate approval. Weeks of debate on legislation that would resume North Carolina executions have changed few, if any, minds of legislators. The capital punishment issue is like many social issues you see debated in North Carolina. You'll find distinctly drawn philosophical lines, with all parties believing their position holds the ethical or moral high ground.
Very few are on the fence. Those who don't believe that first-degree murderers should be executed will come up with any device or motion to stop it.
In 2009, Democrats held power and passed the Racial Justice Act. Its supporters said too many juries and prosecutors in North Carolina were condemning minorities, particularly African Americans, to death, and race played a key role in the selection of death over a lifetime prison sentence. In 2013, Republicans hold supermajority power, and in opinion, the Racial Justice Act targeted the policy of capital punishment, not racial discrimination in capital punishment cases.
The people who understood the act and probably wrote it understood that it was an indefinite moratorium on the death penalty, but I have no doubt that some of the people who voted for it thought it had something to do with race. It did not have. It had almost nothing to do with race. Race was a pretext.
Recent public focus on Senate Bill 306 has revolved around the full repeal of the Racial Justice Act. The legislation also broadens the number of acceptable drug options for lethal injection, tracks training of future executioners, and holds doctors harmless for participating in a lethal injection procedure.
We've tried to do what we can to streamline it, but there will be no quick fix to this. I mean, executions will start up as they should after proper review, but in light of getting rid of the RJA, which has been a log jam created by opponents to the death penalty just to slow it up.
Democratic Cumberland County Representative Rick Glazier says he supports capital punishment but opposes repealing the Racial Justice Act.
It wasn't to end the death penalty, but it was to make sure that we get an issue that's percolated in this state for decades, and that is whether or not decisions were being made on the basis of the color of someone's skin.
New Hanover County Senator Tom Goolsby says Racial Justice Act supporters and inmates claiming racial discrimination are often twisting statistics to prove so-called racial bias in sentencing. Senator Goolsby says the Racial Justice Act allows for the counting of condemned inmates by race, with no comparison of the death sentences imposed on races of other defendants.
It deals only with frequency, not disproportionality. It was a poorly written, ill-conceived law that was simply established to put a de facto moratorium on the death penalty. That's what we stopped.
Representative Rick Glazier says the state Supreme Court would soon hear the first Racial Justice Act appeals. Its expected ruling would establish guidelines for future RJA cases, and Glazier says it would instill efficiency in the appeals process.
What the legislature is now doing is saying, essentially, we fear the result there. We're not going to wait for the result there. We're going to decide ourselves. We've heard enough. We're not going to deal with this issue anymore. And I think that's just fundamentally the wrong legacy to leave.
The only differences between the House and Senate proposals to change capital punishment procedure are considered technical and relatively uncontroversial. That House Judiciary Subcommittee is refining legislation to fight human sex trafficking. The bill essentially rewrites our state's prostitution laws. Pimps would face tougher felony charges, as would customers. Underage prostitutes who are trafficked could see their criminal records cleared. The House and Senate pushed through a new round of Medicaid funding this week. The program is running short of cash to get it through June 30th. The state budget director receives authority to shift up to $451 million that would balance Medicaid's books. Floor debate led to a bit of finger-pointing between Republicans and Democrats over how Medicaid's budget is so historically inaccurate.
I told you all last year, as well as the fact that you were warned by the Secretary that you were going to have a shortfall, yet you shorted the shortfall.
But it absolutely defies logic. Now, the department and their professionals gave the General Assembly the numbers that we were to work on last year for rebasing the program.
The House passed legislation that would reset Raleigh's lease of the Dorothea Dix property. The Senate has offered a quite different vision, setting up negotiations over the fate of that 75-year lease. The full House is expressing a different vision for handling Raleigh's 75-year lease of the Dorothea Dix grounds. The Senate just weeks ago called for the immediate cancellation of that lease. Its leaders say Governor Bev Perdue priced the terms well below market value and left no provision to use Dix lease proceeds or land for state mental health services. The House bill differs in that it wouldn't cancel the lease. It would call a one-year timeout so the state and Raleigh officials can renegotiate a new lease without losing the current one.
This bill makes clear that the legislature cares deeply about the process for how an asset like the Dix campus is transferred. The process should be thoughtful and not rushed. It should be fair to both the state and the city, which I believe this bill will do.
Wake County Representative Darren Jackson told lawmakers the state is disrespecting local government authority by canceling a legal contract because state Republican leaders don't like the lease terms.
What this bill says to me, what I think it will say to people who deal business with our municipalities, our bondholders, is don't do any business with the municipality unless the state agrees to it. Otherwise, the state could come back, as we're doing in this bill, and direct the municipality to take an action, to breach a contract.
But fellow Democratic Wake County Representative Deborah Ross gave credit to House Republicans for slowing down the Senate bill and fundamentally changing it. She says Raleigh city leaders have endorsed the House legislation and that Raleigh city leaders have asked her to support the House bill on Dorothea Dix.
I think with this bill, the state, the governor's office, and the city of Raleigh have worked together on the bill, and they've each gotten things in the bill that they're interested in.
The 111-5 House vote sets the stage for compromise negotiations with Senate leaders. If no deal can be reached, the current Raleigh lease will stand. Mitchell County Senator Ralph Hice joins us to discuss the Dorothea Dix lease. You're on the Senate side. You see what the House has done. It's nothing like what you proposed in your Republican caucus in the Senate. What do you make of the House plan?
Well, I think the problem we're dealing with here is we have a lease that is clearly a problem. We have a lease that we believe is illegal. And that we don't see the proposal and why you would expand that or let that continue to go for a year. It's something we think you need to eliminate and then begin the process.
What's the difference in illegal and just an improper lease that Republican leaders don't like the terms and resent Bev Perdue doing something in her final days?
Well, there's two parts. First of all, for the state to enter into a lease with state property where employees are, there was a requirement under state law that they promote a plan for how to deal with the relocation of those state employees. That was never done. The second thing we're seeing is that the lease finally entered into signed between the governor and the city is substantially different from what the Council of State approved. There are complete clauses that did not exist when the Council of State approved it that came to fact before the lease was signed. So it was that has never even received the approval of the Council of State.
So the Council of State reviews a lease, it approves that lease, it goes back to the negotiating parties back then. And the lease that's signed is missing elements of the contract that the Council of State signed off on.
That's correct.
Is that illegal or is that improper?
Well, I think it means that illegal is in the fact that the state cannot enter into a lease that the Council of State has not signed off on. Under state law, that's the requirement.
What needs to happen with Dix Hill?
Well, I think what we need to look at, first of all, is the current agreement is probably somewhere around the 16th of the value is what's being received by the state right now. I think we need to take a hold on this. We need to first determine what we want to do with the Department of Health and Human Services. Is that the area that we want to continue to have its administration done? Do we need to rebuild that and up? Then we can talk about the remaining facility, what needs to be done with it. If that's a park, if that's other things, then that's fine, but we need to go into that negotiation in good faith with the state's plans done first.
When you look at all these proposals and the McCrory administration weighing in a bit here and there, what you're looking at here is a large piece of parkland, 270 acres, and there's 30 acres somewhere. You're going to build new buildings there in theory and place the Department of Health and Human Services there, or keep those old hospital buildings and just use those as offices?
There have been several proposals floating around about looking at new facilities for the Department of Health and Human Services. They're spread out over 60-some buildings for the administration. The new secretary has found that a huge complication in being able just to communicate and work with the divisions that she have. So I think long-term we are looking at a consolidation, and if those facilities can meet the needs with some additional building, that's fine. If we need a new facility, I don't see why we would go out and try to get property elsewhere when we already have it here.
Is it worth dying on that hill, no pun intended, where the House and the governor say, let's call a one-year timeout and preserve a lease to prevent a third party from jumping in between the state and the city of Raleigh? If you don't compromise, the old lease stays in place. So how do you handle this as a Senate leader sitting there negotiating this deal?
Well, I don't think, I think the legal issues that are now presented means the old lease will not stay in place for a long time period. I think that we need to open this process up, and if the final agreements with the city of Raleigh, then that's an acceptable use, then I think that's a good process. We need to follow our processes in moving forward.
Was there ever a chance that this parkland or this hospital ground would be sold to the private sector and developed into mixed use? You hear that undercurrent that if the city of Raleigh loses the lease, it's going to go to some guy who'll build condos.
Well, I think what we're looking at is that the land was originally given to the state for the purpose of the serving for the mental health, for mentally ill individuals. We have to preserve that usage. So what the problem is if we don't look at all options for the property, we can't come in and take some reduced amount, even if we dedicated that to mentally ill, we've not utilized the property for its purpose. So whether it's taking the entire property and utilizing it for mental health services at the Department of Health and Human Services, or it's getting the full value of it and dedicating those funds for mental health services, both are consistent with what the property was originally given to the state for.
So in summary, you have a House bill, you have a Senate bill, differences, wide differences, narrow differences, in your opinion, going into negotiations?
Well, I think that what's been passed right now is significantly different from what we've seen. I feel strongly that we can come together in conference, and I think we can uphold the concepts of we need to eliminate this lease and allow a process to move forward in a legal manner.
Senator Ralph Hice, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The Senate's Education Committee approved several House-backed bills this week, including a proposal that would streamline community college credit transfers into the UNC system. Some leading House Republicans continued their push to enforce a deal made nearly 2 decades ago between the UNC system and the state community colleges. The agreement would let community college students take their basic university courses locally, then transfer their credit hours in whole into the university system.
We tell these students, well, you can go to the community college and you can take your basic requirements. They might be English, history, a math, or a science. And they take these classes with the expectation that their credits will then transfer to the university where they can work on their degree.
House Majority Leader Edgar Starnes says many individual university campuses only accept these credit hour transfers as electives, and that would negate any cost savings for students taking the 2-year college route.
Then they're required to take the history again, or the science, or the math, whatever. English is the only subject that's universally accepted.
But some Senate Republicans offered a bit of skepticism that university campus leaders are simply refusing to accept community college credit transfer hours. They questioned the difference in academic standards between the 2-year colleges and the 4-year universities.
If it's a standards issue, that's a bigger issue than just they're not doing their job. The expectation of the student is nice to consider, but if there's a standards problem, then we got to figure out how to fix that before we just say it's okay to articulate this stuff.
Community college system leaders say many two-year transfer students don't finish the entire general education transfer program. It's a 44-credit-hour course of study.
The basic premise of the Articulation Agreement is that if the student finishes 44 hours of what we call the Gen Ed core, then all of those courses will transfer to fulfill general education credit at the university. The problem is that only 13% of our students finish the general education core.
Students who don't finish the full 44-credit-hour general education course will have their classes examined for transfer on a class-by-class basis. But community college leaders say this refocus on transfers and that two-decade-old agreement is ongoing, and current discussions have been positive with the UNC system. The House bill to save cursive handwriting lessons in elementary schools earned Senate approval this week. Public schools already teach cursive, but some lawmakers worry that modern-day texting and typing could make cursive handwriting obsolete. So the law will say that kids need to write legibly in cursive by the end of 5th grade. A mandate that students learn their multiplication tables is also part of this bill. Republicans on the House Elections Committee endorsed a Senate bill that would restructure the Wake County School Board. Democrats are calling it a power grab. Republicans say Wake County voters need more say in local school board politics. Senate Democrats cried foul a few weeks ago when Senate Republicans approved legislation to redistrict the Wake County School Board seats. They said when they had power, they never considered such a move when Republicans controlled that school board. But in the House this week, the House Elections Committee signed off on that same redistricting plan.
Every citizen of Wake County, or every voter, will get to vote for 2 members of the school board because there are 2 sets of districts.
The redistricting plan would create 2 regional school board seats in addition to the 7 traditional, more local district seats. These changes would phase in over the next several years. Supporters say they did not propose more than 2 regional seats because countywide elections could pose cost challenges.
It's very expensive to run a countywide race. So we really wanted to narrow it down so that you only had 2 people running in larger than an individual school district.
House Democrats noted the absence of the Wake County School Board at this week's House Elections Committee hearing.
Even though the public has been invited to speak, not a single member of the Wake County School Board is available to speak today because they're interviewing candidates for our new superintendent.
Wake County commissioners were split on the issue. Commissioner Caroline Sullivan says the current bill runs counter to Wake commissioners' legislative goals for school board redistricting.
Instead of 5 countywide at-large seats, we have these 2 super seats, which will end up segregating urban and suburban voters and urban and rural voters, which was not the intent of the Board of Commissioners' legislative goal.
Wake County Commission Chairman Joe Bryan threw his support behind the current redistricting bill.
Will allow people the potential to vote for 2 people on the school board, as well as for the public to participate and have greater turnout and greater representation from the public and actually at the voting booth in the fall.
The bill cleared the Elections Committee on what appears to be a trip towards final House floor debate. Senate committees are weighing legislation to restrict how fuel tax revenue is spent. Some House Republicans believe leftover highway trust fund money is often spent on non-transportation related projects and that's a problem. House Bill 157 would direct extra highway trust fund money to fund urgent road projects. The House Transportation Committee discussed a delayed bill to fundamentally change ferry tolling policy. Discussion revolved around tolls' effects on economic development locally and a common-sense transportation policy for island residents who have few options to drive inland. The House Transportation Committee discussed legislation that aims to address ferry tolls on the North Carolina coast. It cost the state over $30 million to fully operate ferry services. Most of that is state appropriation, but drivers do pay to use many North Carolina ferries. Some conservatives want these ferry tolls eliminated, if possible, through the use of alternative revenue streams. Representative Charles Jeter says the ferry system is very expensive and tolls negatively affect the local economies on the coast. If tolls were priced to cover actual ferry costs, the economic effects would be devastating.
To toll it to the point where it would actually cover the cost would diminish the economic wherewithal of the community to a point that the ferries almost become, you're going to kill businesses.
An original House proposal would have ended ferry tolling and told the Department of Transportation to develop new funding methods. But an amendment has passed to create a waiting period of 1 year before ferry tolling policies could change. All funding options would be on the table for review, including ferry sponsorships and pay services for riders.
Let's see if there's another way that we can generate some income to help pay for these tolls, and it whether you get on there and there's advertising, naming rights, charge for internet access. Well, I think that's good. But I think where I'm having trouble with the bill is you should use these additional sources of revenue to complement the existing tolls, not to supplant them.
Some lawmakers are philosophical about ferry tolling and what it means for North Carolina residents and tourists.
I think of North Carolina as largely having a free system of roads for all of its residents. We who live closer to the mountains, I think, would be very disturbed if somebody said, well, let's start charging all of the tourists that come across the line, and they're going up to Chimney Rock and Asheville and Lake Lure and Blowing Rock.
The bill sits in the House Finance Committee. The House continued tweaking legislation to ban minors from buying electronic cigarettes. There is no debate about banning minors from possessing these vapor-based smoking devices, but there are questions about the timing of this bill, which would have redefined the term tobacco product in state law before the U.S. Food and Drug Administration could finish some ongoing research. There are also some state taxation issues that need to be worked out. Bill supporters say they've solved all those issues. Find us online this weekend. Our show's Facebook page is found at facebook.com/legweek. On Twitter, follow us at @legweekinreview. And our email address is legweek@unctv.org. That's our show. Thanks so much for watching.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.